The rain began as a quiet whisper over the rolling hills of Tennessee, but by midnight it had turned into a roaring force that shook the earth itself. Rivers swelled beyond their banks, roads vanished under rushing water, and families across the small countryside town scrambled to save whatever they could. In the middle of the chaos, while houses trembled under the violent storm, one small stone shelter built into the hillside stood unmoved and silent against the floodwaters. Just months earlier, the neighbors had laughed when they saw the strange structure rising from the hill behind a modest piece of land owned by a quiet young woman named Sarah Mitchell. They called her stubborn, strange, even foolish for burying half her home into solid rock. But on that terrifying night, when the flood swallowed the valley and everything people believed about safety collapsed, the shelter they mocked became the one place that could save them all. Before we continue this powerful story, take a moment to comment, share, and subscribe to the channel if you believe in silent heroes and second chances. Stories like this remind us that sometimes the people others doubt the most are the ones who end up protecting everyone. Sarah Mitchell had always been different from the rest of the town. She grew up in a small Christian family in the Appalachian region of Tennessee, where life was simple but not always easy. Her father, Thomas Mitchell, worked as a carpenter who believed that every structure should respect nature rather than fight against it. When Sarah was a little girl, she often watched him repair barns and old farmhouses while he explained how wind, rain, and soil slowly shaped everything humans built. Those lessons stayed with her long after her father passed away during her college years. After studying environmental engineering in Nashville, Sarah returned to her hometown with knowledge and ideas that many people around her did not fully understand. The land she inherited from her parents sat at the base of a wide hillside that overlooked the town's farmland and winding river. For decades, the property had been considered beautiful but risky. Older residents remembered floods that occasionally surged through the valley during unusually strong storms. Most homes in the area were built on wooden frames slightly above the ground, following traditional methods passed down for generations. When Sarah announced that she planned to build a stone shelter partially inside the hillside instead of a regular house, the town quickly became curious. Construction began quietly during early spring. Sarah spent weeks studying the slope of the hill, mapping water flow patterns and soil stability. She carefully dug into the side of the hill, reinforcing the walls with thick stone blocks and strong timber supports. The structure was not buried completely underground, but blended into the hillside like it had grown naturally from the land itself. A strong arched stone entrance faced the valley, while thick earth above the roof provided insulation and protection from the road. The building looked unusual, almost like an old cave that had been carefully shaped into a home. At first, neighbors drove past slowly just to stare at it. Soon the jokes began. People in the small town were not cruel, but they were used to doing things the way they had always been done. To them, Sarah's design looked strange and unnecessary. Some laughed about the girl who had returned from college, thinking she knew better than generations of farmers and builders. Others believed she had wasted her inheritance building something that looked more like a bunker than a house. But Sarah continued her work quietly. She used large stones collected from the nearby river to strengthen the exterior walls. She installed drainage channels around the structure to guide rainwater safely downhill. She built thick wooden doors reinforced with metal braces and lined the interior with warm wooden panels to make the underground space comfortable and welcoming. By the end of summer, the stone shelter was complete. Inside, the space felt surprisingly warm and peaceful. Sunlight entered through carefully placed windows that faced south toward the valley. The stone walls held steady temperatures even during cold nights and hot afternoons. Sarah planted grass and wildflowers over the soil covering the roof so that the building blended naturally into the hillside landscape. While some neighbors still joked about her unusual house, others slowly began to admire its quiet beauty. Life continued peacefully for several months. Autumn arrived with golden leaves covering the hills, and farmers harvested their crops while the river flowed calmly beside the fields. Sarah spent her days planting trees along the slope and improving the drainage channels around her property. Most people assumed her preparations were unnecessary because the town had not seen a major flood in years. Then winter came with something no one expected. A powerful storm system moved across the southeastern United States, bringing days of relentless rain. Meteorologists warned about rising river levels, But few residents believed the storm would become truly dangerous. The ground was already saturated from earlier rains, and every drop that fell pushed the river higher. By the third night, the rain had not stopped. The river broke its banks. Water surged across the valley like a moving wall, swallowing roads, barns, and fields within minutes. Panic spread to the town as people rushed to gather their families and escape the rising floodwaters. Many homes built on the lower ground quickly became surrounded by deep rushing water that continued climbing higher. Electricity failed across the entire area. Darkness covered the valley except for flashes of lightning tearing through the sky. In the middle of the chaos, one structure remained perfectly stable against the hillside, Sarah's stone shelter. From its elevated position, the entrance remained well above the rising water level. The drainage channel she built carried heavy rain safely around the structure instead of allowing it to pool against the walls. Thick stone construction resisted the violent winds and debris carried by the flood. When several frightened families realized that their homes were becoming unsafe, they remembered the strange stone building on the hill. Through the storm, people began climbing the muddy slope towards Sarah's property. One by one, they reached the shelter's heavy wooden doors, exhausted and soaked from the rain. Inside, the structure remained dry, warm, and protected from the raging storm outside. Sarah welcomed everyone who arrived, guiding them into the safe interior, where candles and lanterns lit the wooden walls with gentle glow. By midnight, more than 20 people had gathered inside the shelter. Children wrapped in blankets sat beside elderly neighbors while the storm roared outside like an unstoppable beast. From the windows carved into the hillside, they could see floodwaters racing across the valley far below, destroying fences and sweeping away everything in their path. But inside the stone shelter, everyone remained safe. The structure held strong against wind, rain, and rising water, exactly as Sarah had designed to do. Hours passed slowly until the rain finally began to weaken before dawn. When the sun rose behind the hills, the town saw the full damage left by the flood. Roads were washed away, fields had turned into lakes, and many homes near the river were badly damaged. Yet the small stone shelter built into the hillside stood untouched. Neighbors who once laughed at the strange house now looked at it with deep respect. What they once called foolish had become the safest place in the entire valley during the worst storm anyone could remember. Before we reach the ending of this emotional story, take a moment to comment below and tell us where you are watching from and whether you believe preparation and courage can change lives. In the months that followed, the town slowly rebuilt what the flood had taken. Many residents began studying Sarah's design and asking her for advice about building stronger homes. With patience and kindness, she helped several families construct safer foundations and better drainage systems for their houses. The girl who had once been laughed at for building a strange stone shelter into the hillside had quietly saved her neighbors during the night they needed help the most. And long after the floodwaters disappeared, the people